While walking at the mall, a security guard came up to me and said, "Ma'am, is this child yours?" I was about to say no, but the kid looked at me with fear in her eyes. She nodded her head slightly and mouthed the words, "Say yes, please," while the guard wasn't looking. Something in her expression made me trust her instantly. "Yes, this is my daughter." I pulled her into a hug and felt her trembling against me. The security guard looked skeptical. He was a heavy-set man with a mustache who reminded me of Paul Blart. She was hiding in the dressing rooms for over an hour. Staff was concerned. "I'm so sorry. We got separated and she must have gotten scared." I rubbed the girl's back trying to seem maternal. You know how kids are. He studied us both for a long moment. The girl buried her face in my shoulder and I could feel her heart racing against my chest. Finally, he nodded and walked away, but I noticed he spoke into his radio as he left. We didn't have much time. As soon as he turned the corner, I knelt down to the girl's level. She had dirty blonde hair in a messy ponytail, and her Pokemon Eevee t-shirt had stains on it. Dark circles under her eyes made her look older than she probably was. Her eyes kept darting around like she expected someone to jump out at any moment. "Are you safe?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "There's someone who took my mom and I'm scared they'll take me too." My heart started racing, but I tried to stay calm for her. I took her hand and noticed how cold her fingers were. "Let's go somewhere with more people, okay?" I led her to the food court where it was crowded and we'd blend in better. The lunch rush meant every table was full and the noise would cover our conversation. I bought her a slice of pizza and a lemonade, then found us seats near the exit. She devoured the food like she hadn't eaten in days. "Who took your mom? What did they look like?" I kept my voice gentle while my eyes scanned every face that passed. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "The man said he was a cop, but he wasn't a cop." My mom knew something was wrong. "How did she know?" I asked while watching a man in a maintenance uniform push a garbage cart past us. The girl took a sip of the lemonade I'd bought her. Her hands shook slightly as she held the cup. "She used to be a cop." She said his badge looked fake and his uniform was wrong. The shoulder patches were for a different county and his belt only had handcuffs. "What happened then?" I noticed the same security guard from earlier standing by the Panda Express watching us. We were shopping for my birthday when he approached us. My mom grabbed my hand really tight and started walking fast, but he followed. She made me go into the changing room at JCPenney and told me, "That man is not a cop. Do not let them grab you by any means." Then I heard yelling, and when I came out, she was gone. When did this happen? I was already pulling out my phone to call 911. 3 days ago. She looked down at her pizza crust. 3 days? Where have you been staying? I tried to keep the shock out of my voice. "My mom's car. She taught me where she hid the spare key under the wheel well, but I ran out of the snacks she kept in there yesterday." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away like she was used to being strong. I was dialing 911 when she suddenly grabbed my arm. Her small fingers dug in with surprising strength. "He's here. The fake cop is here." My thumb froze over the call button. I looked around but saw only normal mall shoppers. Families with strollers eating orange chicken. Teenagers taking selfies by the fountain. A man in a suit checking his phone by the ATM. I don't see anyone in a police uniform. He changed clothes, but I know his face. He limps a little on his left side. And his shoes. My mom taught me to memorize details. Black dress shoes with a scuff on the right toe. She was practically hyperventilating now. "Okay, we're going to calmly walk to the bathroom. Then we'll figure out what to do." I abandoned the 911 call for the moment and grabbed her hand. We stood up, trying to look casual. The girl stayed close to my side, using me as a shield from whoever she'd seen. The food court seemed bigger now, and every face looked suspicious. We walked past the Chinese food place, and I was just really confused. Just as we reached the hallway to the bathrooms, she tugged my hand and was shaking. "That's him. The man in the blue jacket by Subway," she whispered without looking. I glanced over and my blood went cold. I saw the man's profile and knew who that was without a doubt. No, it can't be. Are you absolutely sure?" My voice came out strangled. The girl peeked around me, then quickly hid again. "That's him. He's the one who took my mom. He had a partner too, a woman, but I didn't see her face." In my head I thought, "A woman? But that man is my husband." My whole body went cold and I grabbed the girl's hand tighter while pulling her into the bathroom. The heavy door swung shut behind us and I pushed her into the biggest stall at the end, while my hands shook so bad I could barely turn the lock. The girl pressed herself against the wall and watched me with those big scared eyes while I tried to process what I'd just seen. My husband was out there in the food court, and this kid said he kidnapped her mom 3 days ago. I pulled out my phone and typed a text trying to keep my fingers steady. "Hey babe, where are you?" The 3 dots appeared almost right away. "At work dealing with inventory, why?" My stomach turned because I'd just seen him standing by the Subway in his blue jacket that he only wore on weekends. The girl tugged on my shirt and whispered that we needed to leave right now because he might have seen us. I cracked the stall door open and peeked out into the empty bathroom, then slowly opened the main door to look down the hallway. The security guard from earlier was walking toward the food court with his radio up to his mouth, and I pulled back quickly. We couldn't go back that way and the girl was starting to shake again. I spotted a side exit door near the family bathroom that led to a service corridor and grabbed her hand. We slipped out fast and found ourselves in a white hallway that smelled like cleaning supplies with arrows pointing toward the parking garage. My sneakers squeaked on the waxed floor as we half ran past storage rooms and employee break areas. The girl stayed right beside me and kept looking back over her shoulder every few steps. We pushed through another heavy door and suddenly we were in the parking garage with the smell of exhaust and oil hitting us. I couldn't remember where I'd parked and started clicking my key fob while we walked between the rows of cars. Finally, I heard my Honda beep from 2 rows over and we rushed toward it. The girl climbed into the passenger seat and immediately ducked down below the window. while I started the engine with shaking hands. I sat there for a second, trying to decide if I should call 911 right now or drive somewhere safe first. The girl must have sensed my hesitation because she looked up at me and said, her mom always told her not to trust anyone in uniform unless you're absolutely sure they're real cops. She said it quietly, but firmly, like she was repeating something she'd been taught many times. That made sense considering what happened to her mom, and I realized my husband might have connections at the police department. He'd mentioned cop friends before, though I'd never met them, and now that seemed suspicious. I decided we needed more information before involving anyone official, so I put the car in reverse and started backing out. The girl sat up a little and mentioned that her mom's car was still somewhere in the mall parking lot, with important stuff hidden inside. She knew exactly which section because she'd been living in it for 3 days and memorized all the landmarks nearby. I drove slowly through the garage and out into the bright sunlight of the surface lot. We circled around to the other side of the mall near the old Sears entrance that had been closed for years. The girl pointed to a faded gray Honda Civic with a cracked windshield parked under a broken light pole. She directed me to the park a few spaces away so we wouldn't be obvious, then showed me exactly where her mom hid the spare key. It was magnetic and stuck up inside the rear wheel, well covered in road grime and rust. The girl knew right where to reach and pulled it out like she'd done it before. Inside, the car smelled stale and there were empty granola bar wrappers and juice boxes scattered on the back seat. The girl went straight to the glove compartment and pulled out a manila folder that was wedged behind the owner's manual. Inside was her mom's old police badge from when she worked for the county sheriff's department 5 years ago. There were also some photocopied case files about missing persons and fraud investigations, plus a gas station receipt with a partial license plate number scratched on it in pen. The girl explained that her mom had been investigating something on her own time before this happened. She'd overheard phone calls about people pretending to be cops and taking people who owed money or had warrants. The receipt was from the day before they got grabbed, and her mom must have seen something suspicious. I took pictures of everything with my phone, then put the folder back where we found it. We locked the car and put the key back in its hiding spot in case we needed it again. Back in my car, I finally accepted that we needed real police help, despite the risks of my husband having connections. I dialed 911, and when the operator answered, I tried to keep my voice calm while explaining that I had a child whose mother had been kidnapped 3 days ago. The operator asked a bunch of questions about where we were and if we were safe right now. She told us to come straight to the main precinct downtown and said she'd notify the desk sergeant we were coming. The drive took 20 minutes and the girl stayed quiet the whole time, just staring out the window. The police station was an old brick building with narrow windows and metal detectors at the entrance. Inside smelled like coffee and floor wax, and there were people sitting on benches looking tired and frustrated. I told the desk officer why we were there, and he made a call, then directed us to a conference room down the hall. A woman in a suit came in and introduced herself as someone who worked with child victims. She took the girl to another room to talk privately while a detective came to get my statement. I explained everything about finding the girl at the mall and what she'd told me about the fake cop who took her mom. I described seeing a suspicious man but didn't mention yet that it was my husband, because I needed to think about how to handle that. The detective took notes and said they'd pull the mall security footage to identify the suspect, while the girl worked with the specialist to provide more details. About 20 minutes later, a tall black man in a gray suit walked in carrying a thick folder and introduced himself as Detective Jamal Griffith. He had this calm way of moving that made me think he'd seen a lot of bad stuff but still cared about helping people. He sat down across from me and opened the folder, which had forms and photos inside. He asked me to go through everything again from the beginning and took notes on a yellow legal pad while I talked. When I got to the part about seeing the man at the mall, his pen stopped moving and he looked up at me. He asked specific questions about the man's height and build and the exact location where I saw him. I described the blue jacket and the limp and how the girl recognized him instantly. He pulled out a tablet and showed me security camera stills from different angles around the mall. The images were grainy, but you could make out people's faces if you looked close enough. He had me point out where we were sitting and which direction the man was facing. While we were going through the photos, a woman in a blazer knocked and came in saying she was from Child Protective Services. She started talking about emergency foster placement for the girl and paperwork that needed to be filed immediately. I felt my stomach drop thinking about the girl being sent to strangers after everything she'd been through. I told the CPS woman that the girl should have some say in what happens to her since she'd been so smart and brave through all this. The woman looked annoyed and said protocol was protocol, but Detective Griffith backed me up. He said the girl had shown remarkable judgment and deserved to be heard about her preferences. The CPS woman left to talk to the girl and came back 10 minutes later looking less rigid. She said the girl had asked if she could call me later and wanted me to be part of the process. Detective Griffith helped set up approved contact between us and gave me a special number to use. The CPS woman agreed I could be listed as a support person during the placement process. She had me fill out background check forms and emergency contact information. Detective Griffith went back to showing me photos from mall security and asked if anyone looked familiar or suspicious. He had dozens of images from different days and times all organized in a binder. I was looking through them when the girl came back into the room with the specialist. She stood next to me and started looking at the photos too. Then she pointed at one image and my whole body went cold. It was a profile shot of my husband walking past the orange Julius stand 3 days ago. The timestamp said 2:47 p.m., which was right when the girl said her mom got taken. My hands started shaking and I couldn't breathe properly. Detective Griffith noticed my reaction and asked if I recognized someone. Before I could answer, my phone started ringing and my husband's name appeared on the screen. His timing was always creepy like that, calling right when I was thinking about him. I answered trying to sound normal while everyone in the room watched me. He asked where I was in that controlling voice he used when he was suspicious. I told him I was still shopping at Nordstrom looking for a birthday gift for my sister. He said I'd been gone a long time and asked which Nordstrom I was at. I said the one downtown, and he asked what I'd bought so far. I made up something about looking at purses but not finding the right one yet. He kept pushing for details like what color and what brand and how much they cost. His voice got harder when I stayed vague, and he said he'd driven by the mall earlier and didn't see my car. I said I'd parked on the other side by Macy's because it was less crowded. He went quiet for a few seconds, then said, I better not be lying to him. After I hung up, my hands were shaking so bad I dropped the phone. Detective Griffith picked it up and looked at me with this understanding expression. I took a deep breath and told him the man in the photo might be my husband. He didn't act shocked or judge me, but immediately started asking practical questions. He wanted to know my husband's full name and date of birth and where he worked. He asked about our vehicles and if my husband had any law enforcement connections or training. I told him my husband used to work security at different places, but never stayed at one job long. Detective Griffith called someone and asked them to pull mall security footage from today and 3 days ago. He wanted every angle that showed the food court and the surrounding stores. Within an hour, they had a laptop set up showing different camera feeds. We watched my husband walking through the mall 3 days ago, with that slight limp on his left side. His black dress shoes were visible in one shot, and you could see the scuff on the right toe. The footage from today showed him in the blue jacket moving through the food court, right when we were there. Detective Griffith pointed out how my husband kept checking exits and watching people like he was hunting. An officer came in and whispered something to the detective, who nodded and looked serious. He told me they'd put an unmarked car outside the station 20 minutes ago for routine surveillance. The car had just radioed in that my husband's truck was driving by slowly like he was looking for something. When the driver noticed the surveillance unit, he sped up and left the area. Detective Griffith said this confirmed my husband was watching for me and probably knew I'd come here. He made some calls and within an hour had arranged a safe place for me to stay. It was the extended stay hotel the department used for witnesses that needed protection. He had tech specialists come mirror my phone so every call and text from my husband would be tracked and recorded. They gave me a different phone to use for personal calls and told me to keep my regular phone turned on and charged. They wanted my husband to think everything was normal while they built their case. That night, I was sitting in the hotel room when the new phone rang. It was the girl calling from her emergency foster placement. She sounded scared but said the family seemed nice and gave her own room with a lock on the door. She said she kept remembering more details about where they took her mom. There was this specific smell she noticed. Rubber mixed with bleach like a hospital but different. She thought it might be some kind of storage place or warehouse because she heard metal doors slamming. I wrote down everything she said about the smell and the metal doors, and Detective Griffith immediately made calls to get a search warrant for my house. 2 hours later, while my husband was still at work, 6 officers showed up at my door with the paperwork. They went through every room, pulling stuff out of closets and checking behind furniture. One officer found a prepaid phone taped under our bedroom dresser that I never knew existed. The call history showed dozens of calls to storage facilities on the outskirts of town over the past month. My regular phone buzzed with a text from my husband asking where I was and saying I needed to come home right away. He said I was overreacting about something and making a big deal out of nothing. His next message said he knew I'd been to the police station because a coworker saw my car there. He kept texting that we needed to talk, and I was being crazy and paranoid like always. The officers took photos of everything, including the texts, while I sat on my couch watching strangers go through my life. Detective Griffith arrived and asked me about our finances while the search continued. I told him about the money problems we'd been having since my husband lost his previous job 6 months ago. I mentioned finding a shoebox full of cash in our garage last week that he said was from selling tools. The detective wrote everything down and said desperate people do desperate things for money. He asked if my husband had any connections to law enforcement or security work. I remembered he'd worked as a temp at different security companies over the years, but never stayed anywhere long. The foster family called that afternoon to say the girl was doing okay, but having bad dreams about her mom. They said she woke up screaming twice and kept asking if I was safe. Detective Griffith helped arrange for me to visit her the next day and bring some things from her mom's car. I drove back to the mall parking lot and found the Honda still there with a police seal on it. An officer met me there and let me take a stuffed bear and a blanket from the back seat. The next morning, I went to the foster home, which was a small house with a swing set in the yard. The girl ran to me when I walked in and hugged me tight for a long time. I gave her the bear and blanket and she held them against her face, breathing in the smell. We sat on the couch and she started talking about the day her mom was taken. She remembered driving past a water tower with a smiley face painted on it right before they stopped. She said the fake cop's car was already there waiting when they pulled into what looked like an old warehouse area. This detail helped the police narrow down which storage facilities to check since there was only one water tower like that in town. Detective Griffith called me that night to say they'd searched 3 storage sites near that water tower. At one location, they found zip ties and rope along with a receipt that had fallen behind some boxes. The receipt had a woman's name on it that I didn't recognize at all. The name was Sophia something, and the receipt was for cleaning supplies from 2 weeks ago. Traffic camera footage showed my husband's truck at those same storage units 2 nights before the kidnapping happened. The timeline was getting clearer, and the evidence was piling up against him. I went back to the mother's car the next day with permission to look for anything else helpful. Under the driver's seat, I found a notebook with dates and locations written in neat handwriting. The notes described other fake cop incidents in 3 nearby counties over the past year. Each incident involved someone approaching women with children claiming to be police, but having wrong uniforms or badges. Detective Griffith ran the information and found reports matching the descriptions, but no arrests had been made. He discovered my husband had worked as a temp for the company that handles mall security contracts. The work records showed he'd been assigned to our mall twice, which explained how he knew the blind spots. He would have learned where all the cameras were and which areas security rarely checked. The girl did another recorded interview at the police station with a child specialist present. She remembered more about the woman who was with the fake cop that day. The woman had a crescent moon tattoo on her wrist that she noticed when the woman grabbed her arm. She also remembered the woman wrote something down with her left hand which stuck out to her. These details were added to the case file along with everything else they'd gathered so far. My husband kept calling and texting, but I didn't answer following the detective's instructions to let everything go to voicemail. His messages got more angry and then switched to apologizing and saying he loved me. The police said this pattern was typical for someone who knew they were caught. I stayed at the hotel another night, barely sleeping and wondering how I'd missed all the signs. The next morning, Detective Griffith called to say they had enough evidence to arrest my husband. They were planning to pick him up at his workplace that afternoon to avoid any problems. I felt sick thinking about how our neighbors would react when they found out what he'd done. The detective said I should prepare myself because this would probably make the news. I went back to the hotel room and started looking through my husband's stuff on our shared cloud account. His photos synced automatically, and I scrolled through hundreds of boring work pictures, until I found something weird. There were photos from a bar dated 3 weeks ago with a woman I'd never seen before. She had dark hair pulled back and was laughing at something my husband was saying. In one photo, she was holding a drink and I could see her left wrist clearly. The crescent moon tattoo was right there, exactly like the girl had described. My hands shook as I screenshot everything and sent them to Detective Griffith's email. He called me back within minutes and said they'd identified her as Sophia Greer from DMV records. The police got a warrant for her apartment that same night, but when they arrived, she was already gone. The landlord let them in and the place was mostly empty except for some furniture and trash. The neighbors told officers they'd seen her loading boxes into a white van at 3 a.m. 2 days ago. One neighbor remembered the van had a dent in the back bumper and a parking sticker from the community college. Detective Griffith called me the next morning to warn me that my husband might try to come home. They had officers watching our house just in case he showed up. Sure enough, around noon he pulled into our driveway in his truck. The moment he saw the unmarked police cars, he threw the truck in reverse and took off down the street. Officers chased him on foot when he abandoned the truck and ran through the Johnsons' backyard. He jumped their fence and disappeared into the woods behind our neighborhood. The police searched for hours with dogs, but he knew those woods from years of jogging there. They found his footprints leading to the creek, but lost the trail after that. Detective Griffith said I couldn't go back to the hotel anymore since my husband might know about it. They moved me to a different safe house across town that afternoon. I packed my few things into garbage bags and left everything else behind. The new place was a small apartment above a dry cleaner with bars on the windows. The isolation hit me hard that first night when I realized I couldn't call anyone or go anywhere. I understood it was for safety, but the loneliness was crushing. 2 days later, the Financial Crimes Unit called with their findings about my husband's bank records. They'd found deposits from 3 different companies that turned out to be fronts for illegal skip tracing operations. These weren't real bounty hunters, but criminals who grabbed people for money without any legal authority. The payments went back 18 months and totaled over $40,000. My husband had been doing this for over a year, while I thought he was working overtime at his regular job. The girl called me that night from her foster placement, and she was crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Her foster mom got on the phone and said she'd been having nightmares and woke up screaming. I talked to the girl and helped her count to 10 slowly while taking deep breaths. We did the breathing exercises her mom had taught her until her crying slowed down. She kept saying she missed her mom and wanted to go home. I stayed on the phone for an hour until she finally fell asleep. Her foster mom thanked me and said the girl had been asking about me every day. 3 days after that, Detective Griffith called with news about Sophia's car. They'd found it abandoned in a parking garage downtown with the plates removed. The crime scene team found blood on the passenger seat that matched the mother's DNA from her medical records. The amount of blood suggested she'd been hurt, but probably not killed. There were also zip ties in the trunk and a roll of duct tape under the seat. The parking garage had cameras, but someone had spray painted over the lenses. Detective Griffith came to the safe house that afternoon to go over everything we knew so far. I finally told him the truth about them all. I'd recognized my husband right away when the girl pointed him out, but my brain wouldn't accept it. I kept thinking there had to be some mistake or explanation. The detective said denial was completely normal when someone you love turns out to be dangerous. He'd seen it hundreds of times in domestic cases. He asked if I'd be willing to help them catch my husband since he might contact me. The plan would be to set up a meeting somewhere public with tons of backup nearby. I was scared but agreed because I wanted this to end. They would put a wire on me and have officers all around wherever we met. My husband was getting desperate based on his text messages and might make a mistake. The detective promised they wouldn't let anything happen to me. The next day, a victim advocate came to explain my rights and make sure I understood what I was agreeing to. She was an older woman with kind eyes who'd worked with crime victims for 20 years. She asked if I felt pressured to do the operation, and I told her I wanted to help. We went over safety plans and signals I could use if I felt unsafe. She gave me her cell number and said I could change my mind at any time. Nobody would blame me if I decided not to go through with it. That night, my phone buzzed with a voice message from the girl, and when I played it, her small voice filled my empty apartment saying she was proud of me for helping catch the bad man. She said her foster mom helped her record it and she wanted me to know I was brave like her mom taught her to be. Her words made my chest tight and I played the message 3 more times while sitting on my kitchen floor crying, because this kid who'd been through so much was trying to make me feel better. The next morning, Detective Griffith called to say they were ready to set up the meeting with my husband and asked if I was still willing to go through with it. My hands shook as I said yes. and he explained they'd have officers in unmarked cars all around the park, plus some dressed as joggers and people walking dogs. He said I should text my husband that I wanted to talk about our marriage and see if he'd meet me at Riverside Park near the playground where we used to go on dates when we first met. I sent the text with my fingers trembling so bad I had to retype it twice, and within 5 minutes he replied saying he'd be there at 2 o'clock, and we could work everything out. The detective came to the safe house to put a tiny microphone under my shirt collar and showed me the hand signal to use if I felt unsafe, which was touching my left ear twice. 2 officers drove me to the park in an unmarked sedan and dropped me off a block away so I could walk to the meeting spot looking natural. The playground was busy with kids on swings and parents on benches, which made me feel safer knowing there were witnesses everywhere, plus all the undercover cops scattered around. I sat on the bench where we'd carved our initials 5 years ago and tried to breathe normally while watching a woman push her toddler on the swing set. My husband showed up 10 minutes late, walking with a worse limp than before, and his clothes looked wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in his car. He sat down, leaving space between us, and immediately started talking about how Sophia had forced him into everything by threatening to hurt me if he didn't help her grab people for money. His story kept changing as he talked, first saying he just drove the car, then admitting he helped restrain people, but claiming he never hurt anyone badly. I asked about the girl's mother, and he looked around nervously before leaning closer and whispering that she was still alive, but only he knew where. He said he'd been keeping her fed and giving her water, but she needed medical help soon, and he'd only tell the location if they promised him a reduced sentence. The detective's voice came through my earpiece telling me to keep him talking, so I asked why he did it, and he grabbed my wrist saying we needed the money for IVF treatments and a bigger house. His grip hurt, and I saw 2 joggers change direction toward us, but then he let go and stood up saying he knew I was wearing a wire because I kept touching my collar. He started to run, but his bad leg made him slow, and within seconds 3 officers tackled him to the ground right in front of the playground where parents grabbed their kids and hurried away. They cuffed him while he yelled that the mother would die if they didn't make a deal with him, but Detective Griffith just read him his rights and had him loaded into a patrol car. Back at the police station, my husband's lawyer showed up within an hour demanding to speak with his client privately before any questioning. The detective paced the hallway outside the interview room, checking his watch every few minutes because every second counted for finding the mother alive. After 3 hours of negotiations, the lawyer came out saying his client would reveal the location in exchange for dropping the kidnapping charge down to unlawful imprisonment. The prosecutor argued for 2 more hours while I sat in the victim services room drinking cold coffee and thinking about the mother suffering somewhere. Finally, they reached a deal where my husband would get 12 years instead of 25, if the mother was found alive, and he testified against Sophia and the others in the ring. He gave them an address for a storage unit off Highway 87 near the industrial district, and within minutes every available unit raced there with sirens blaring. The storage facility manager met them with bolt cutters, and they found the mother in Unit 447 tied to a metal chair with duct tape over her mouth and zip ties on her wrists and ankles. She was conscious but weak from dehydration, and the paramedics started an IV right there in the storage unit while checking her vitals. They rushed her to the hospital with Detective Griffith following the ambulance to get her statement as soon as the doctors cleared her. The girl was brought to the hospital with her foster mom and a counselor to reunite with her mother, who was hooked up to monitors but awake and crying. They held each other for 20 minutes without saying anything, while the medical staff checked them both for signs of trauma that might need immediate intervention. The mother kept touching her daughter's face like she couldn't believe she was real, and the girl wouldn't let go of her mom's hand even when the nurse needed to adjust the IV. Meanwhile, the detective got word that Sophia's credit card had been used at a gas station 2 states over and traffic cameras caught her car heading toward the border. The investigation revealed she was part of a larger network of fake cops who'd been grabbing people for illegal bounty hunting operations across 5 states over the past 3 years. That night, the local news ran the story with my husband's mugshot, and suddenly my phone started buzzing nonstop with calls and texts from reporters wanting interviews. By morning, someone had posted my photo and address online saying I must have known what my husband was doing and deserved to be in jail too. The harassment got so bad with people calling me a kidnapper's wife and sending death threats that I had to delete all my social media accounts and change my phone number completely. The next morning, I went straight to the courthouse with all the bank statements I'd been gathering and filed for divorce citing immediate danger and criminal activity. The clerk gave me forms for a restraining order too, and I filled them out right there in the lobby with my hands still shaking from everything. Within 2 hours, a judge signed the emergency order preventing my husband from coming within 500 feet of me or contacting me in any way. The court also froze our joint bank accounts pending investigation into the illegal money, which meant I couldn't access our savings, but at least he couldn't either. 3 days later, my husband's lawyer called the prosecutor's office saying his client wanted to make a deal and would give up everyone involved in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutor told me they met for 6 hours going back and forth on terms while my husband sat there in his orange jumpsuit looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He agreed to testify against Sophia and 12 other people in the fake cop ring if they'd reduce his sentence from 25 years down to 15, with possibility of parole in 10. The deal made me sick, but Detective Griffith explained it was the only way to take down the whole operation and save other victims. Meanwhile, the mother was dealing with her own problems as the police department opened an internal investigation into her old cases, since she'd been a cop before. She had to sit through hours of questioning about whether she'd ever seen signs of this criminal ring during her time on the force. The investigators went through every arrest she'd made and every report she'd filed looking for connections, but she cooperated completely and answered everything. All she wanted was to focus on getting better and being there for her daughter who needed her more than ever after everything they'd been through. Social services finally approved the girl to go back home with her mom, but only under strict supervision with weekly check-ins and mandatory therapy sessions. They moved into a smaller apartment near the hospital where the mother could continue her physical therapy for the injuries from being tied up so long. The girl helped her mom with exercises every morning before school, and they started going to family counseling twice a week to work through the trauma together. The counselor taught them breathing exercises and grounding techniques for when the memories got too strong, which happened a lot at first. 5 weeks after everything started, the police got a tip that Sophia was at a Greyhound station trying to buy a ticket to Mexico under a fake name. Security cameras showed her wearing a wig and sunglasses, but the crescent tattoo on her wrist gave her away when she handed over cash for the ticket. Police surrounded the bus just as she was boarding and found 3 fake IDs in her purse along with $8,000 in cash wrapped in rubber bands. She fought them and tried to run, but they tackled her right there on the platform, while other passengers recorded everything on their phones. The preliminary hearing started 2 months later, and I had to testify about everything I saw and knew, which meant facing my husband in court for the first time since his arrest. I wore my most professional outfit and kept my voice steady even when his lawyer tried to make me look like I was lying about not knowing anything. My husband sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't fit right anymore since he'd lost weight in jail and kept trying to catch my eye. I told the court about finding the money in our garage and seeing him at the mall with the girl, and how he'd lied about being at work that day. The prosecutor showed security footage and phone records that backed up everything I said while my husband just stared at his hands on the table. After my testimony, I was walking to the parking garage when my husband's mother grabbed my arm and begged me to visit him in jail. I pulled away and kept walking, but then my husband himself called out from where guards were leading him back to holding after the hearing. He said he was sorry, and that he never meant for any of this to happen, but his apology was all about how hard this was for him. He talked about his debts and his fear, and how Sophia had manipulated him, but never once mentioned the mother tied up in that storage unit, or the little girl hiding alone in a car for 3 days. I turned my back on him and walked away while he kept yelling that he loved me until the guards dragged him through the doors. Sophia's preliminary hearing was the next week, and her lawyer was much more aggressive than my husband's had been about attacking the evidence. He argued that the storage unit receipt could have been planted, and that the witness identifications were unreliable since the girl was traumatized and I was biased. The judge threw out 2 of the lesser charges for lack of direct evidence, but kept the kidnapping and conspiracy charges that could still get her 20 years. Sophia sat there the whole time with no expression on her face, like none of this mattered to her at all, which made me even angrier. After all the court stuff, I finally started seeing a therapist because I couldn't sleep and kept having panic attacks whenever I saw men who looked like my husband. The therapist's office had soft lighting and a white noise machine, but I still felt exposed talking about how stupid I felt for not knowing who I'd married. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I heard him trying to get in, even though I knew he was locked up. The therapist taught me to journal when I couldn't sleep, and slowly the nightmares started happening less often, though they never went away completely. The girl went back to the school a month after reuniting with her mom, but it was really hard for her to adjust to normal kid stuff again. Loud noises made her panic, and she couldn't handle being in crowded hallways between classes, so they gave her permission to leave 5 minutes early. Her teacher told me she was using the coping skills from therapy like counting to 10 and focusing on her breathing when things got overwhelming. She even started making friends with a quiet girl who sat with her at lunch and didn't ask questions about why she sometimes had to leave suddenly. Detective Griffith called me one afternoon while I was packing boxes in my bedroom and told me the girl's mother needed work. He knew someone at a security company downtown who was hiring for desk work and wondered if I could drive her to the interview since she still didn't have a car. I picked her up the next morning and she wore the only nice outfit she had left, a black blazer that hung loose on her frame after everything she'd been through. The security company was in a plain office building near the courthouse, and the manager seemed nice enough when he shook her hand. She got the job that same day, starting part-time at minimum wage, but it was something. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers finally came through and I signed them at my kitchen table without crying. The apartment I found across town was half the size of our old house, but the rent was cheap and the neighbors kept to themselves. I packed our wedding photos into a cardboard box and shoved it in the back of the closet where I wouldn't have to look at them. The china we got as wedding gifts went to Goodwill along with the matching towels and the stupid throw pillows he picked out. Moving day came and I loaded everything into a rental truck by myself because I didn't want anyone's pity or help. The new place smelled like fresh paint and had water stains on the ceiling, but it was mine alone. 3 months after everything happened, an envelope showed up at my new address with the girl's handwriting on it. Inside was an invitation to her birthday party, the one they'd been shopping for when everything went wrong. The party was at a park near their new apartment and only 5 kids showed up, but everyone seemed genuinely happy. The girl wore a new Pokemon shirt and her mom had made a homemade cake that leaned to one side. They sang happy birthday and the girl blew out her candles in one breath like she'd been practicing. When she hugged me goodbye, she whispered thank you, and I had to blink hard to keep from crying in front of everyone. A week later, another envelope arrived. This one from the state prison where my husband was being held. His handwriting looked shaky and the letter went on for 3 pages about his gambling debts and how scared he'd been of the people he owed money to. He wrote about how Sophia had promised him quick cash and how he'd convinced himself nobody would really get hurt. I read it once standing by my mailbox, then walked straight to the dumpster and threw it away without responding. The trial dates kept getting pushed back, but finally 6 months after that day at the mall, the sentences came down. Sophia got 8 years with possibility of parole in 5, and my husband got his plea deal time of 15 years. The girl and her mom had moved into their own apartment by then with help from victim services and some nonprofit that helped crime survivors. The mom was working full-time hours at the security company and had even gotten a small raise after her boss saw how reliable she was. I was working 2 jobs myself, cashier at Target during the day and stocking shelves at a grocery store 3 nights a week. My back hurt constantly, and I fell asleep standing up sometimes, but the bills were getting paid without his income. The girl texted me pictures sometimes of her school projects or her cat they'd gotten from the shelter. She was doing better in the school, and her grades were mostly B's now that she could focus without being scared all the time. Detective Griffith stopped by the Target where I worked one day to check how I was doing and mentioned they'd arrested 2 more people from the fake cop ring. Most of them were in custody now, though he admitted a couple were probably in Mexico or somewhere they couldn't reach. He gave me his card again and said to call if I ever felt unsafe, but nothing weird had happened since the trials ended. 8 months after everything, I met someone at my second job who made me laugh for the first time in forever. He knew my whole story because everyone at work had gossiped about it, but he didn't treat me like I was broken or dangerous. We went for coffee after our shift one night and he listened without judging when I told him the parts the gossip had gotten wrong. He had his own messy divorce story and understood why I flinched when someone came up behind me too fast. We took things slow and he never pushed when I said I needed space to process everything. The girl's mom called me one day to say she'd been promoted to full-time supervisor at the security company with benefits and everything. Her voice sounded stronger than it had in months, and she invited me over to see their apartment now that they'd had time to really settle in. The girl had her own room with Pokemon posters and a desk where she did her homework every night without being asked. She showed me the certificate she'd won for a school writing contest where she wrote about what real bravery means. The essay was about her mom teaching her to memorize details and stay smart when you're scared, and how sometimes being brave means asking a stranger for help in a mall bathroom. We all had scars that would probably never completely go away, but we were building something new from what was left. Thanks for letting me wonder right alongside you. Definitely been something sharing these moments. Until next time. Like the video, it helps more than you think.